Hello everybody and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Video Clips. And I've got a couple topics I want to cover. First one is the articles of impeachment against Mike Dewine. State Representative John Becker here in Ohio has drafted 10 articles of impeachment against the Emperor of Ohio, as I call him. He's asking the rest of his colleagues to join. I will tell you up front that I think that there probably aren't enough votes to take Dewine out, but I think the mere fact of that this has been drafted, and I'll tell you about Dewine's response to it in a minute, is very telling. What Becker had to say is, while the General Assembly has attempted to work with the governor, he's vetoed Senate Bill 55, he's threatened to veto other reasonable legislation. In fact, he stated publicly he would just veto anything that reigned in his power. And I think you'll see from I'm just going to tell you real briefly what the 10 articles are, that he's done a lot of things that are unconstitutional. And so there's a good reason for the legislature to do something like this, because the way that our government is supposed to work is we have checks and balances, and the legislature is supposed to be one of the checks and balances on the governor's actions. So the mandate that Dewine has instituted here, we still can't have concerts and arts events and fairs and that sort of thing. Movie theaters have ridiculous requirements. Restaurants can't open fully. They have to close at 10 o'clock at night, and it's just ridiculous. So Becker says that he held out hope that he wouldn't have to do it. He said, "For months and months," this is a quote, "I've been hearing the cries of my constituents and the suffering people from every corner of Ohio. They keep screaming, do something. They're hurting. Their businesses are declining and depreciating. Their jobs have vanished. The communities that were sustaining their lives are collapsing and becoming shells of what they once were. Living in fear, many have turned to drugs and, yes, even suicide to end or tolerate the unbearable pain inflicted by the governor on their livelihoods and the damage caused by his unraveling of the fabric of Ohio." And I'm going to talk about that on Friday under consequences, because we actually have some Ohio data that I think is really disturbing. While deaths and hospitalizations from COVID-19 flatten, the governor continues to press his boot on the throat of Ohio's economy. Due to the unilateral actions of Dewine, a growing number of businesses have failed and continue to fail. Millions of frustrated, exasperated, and suffering Ohioans are relying on the General Assembly to take control and end their government-driven affliction. So I'm going to give you the 10 articles of impeachment. One is violated the separation of powers by having the Ohio Department of Health issue orders outside the scope of its authority that are tantamount to creating new laws, conspired with the Secretary of State to move the March 17th primary election, which they didn't have the power to do, unconstitutionally ordered the closures of businesses because of coronavirus fears, which resulted in record high unemployment. I won't read the detail, you get the idea. Failed to anticipate or plan for more than 1 million newly unemployed Ohioans who suffered the additional indignity of being unable to communicate with an overwhelmed Department of Job and Family Services to file claims. So he created this mess and put in place absolutely nothing that would help all of these people. And every day you hear from people who haven't, they've been unemployed since spring and still haven't managed to get their claims filed properly with the state of Ohio. Ordered the shutdown of schools, a power that belongs to the Department of Education for the state. And then after the schools reopened, ordered that all students must wear masks. Has repeatedly proven his incompetence by providing wildly inaccurate forecasts and repeatedly misleading COVID-19 data, and committed misfeasance and malfeasance with his policy prescriptions, which have proven to be far worse than the virus itself. Had his administration issue a stay-at-home order for Ohioans, which violated citizens' due process rights and civil liberties, required Ohioans to wear face masks in houses of worship, issued face mask rules that promote fear, turns neighbors against neighbors, and contracts the economy by making people fearful to leave their homes, temporarily banned liquor sales to non-Ohio residents in 6 counties near the Pennsylvania border in violation of the U.S. Constitution, which gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce. I don't think that there are going to be enough votes in the legislature. We have too many people who think that Mike Dewine is saving lives. And here's the bottom line. For every action that you take, there are other actions that follow. And the fact that this Emperor Dewine doesn't want to even consider those things is just almost incomprehensible to me. And when asked about this, he's very flippant. He says, well, let them do whatever they want. I'm busy over here, you know, if that's the way they want to spend their time. He just has complete and total disregard. He doesn't even want to have a conversation with anybody about this. And so he really, when I've said he's declared himself the Emperor of Ohio, he is acting like the Emperor of Ohio. It's like living in a communist country. The communists really don't care to hear from their citizens because they make up their minds what they're going to do. It has no consideration. There is no consideration for what their citizens want. So in any case, at least it brings public the things that he's done wrong, and some of which he should know better. Apparently he doesn't, or he doesn't care. But I thought it was interesting. I read the comments on a couple of the legislators who had signed in. You could read what the comments were. And there were a handful of people who said, oh, he's saving lives and he's a model for the rest of the country. The vast majority of them were like, yeah, get him out of here. I think that's the sentiment of most people in Ohio. Now, the next thing I'm going to report on is really fascinating, and I decided to dig into it. So people started sending me last week, actually a week and a half ago, this news flash about 2,700 plus evangelical Christians who had signed a statement called, quote, a Christian statement on science for pandemic times. And the statement urged the Christian community to not politicize the COVID-19 debacle and also to get a vaccine when it was ready. And then shortly thereafter, I was in a meeting, a Zoom meeting with a group of leaders, and they said there were up to 6,000 Christians that had signed this. And I thought that this was really strange. So anyway, we are deeply concerned, the statement read, about the polarization and politicization of science in the public square when so many lives are at stake. The word science has become a weapon in the culture wars. Scientists are vilified and their findings ignored, whilst conspiracy theories go viral. Sadly, Christians seem just as susceptible to these trends. Thoughtful Christians may disagree on public policy in response to the coronavirus, but none of us should ignore clear scientific evidence, the statement published online by the nonprofit organization BioLogos says. We call on all Christians to follow the advice of public health experts and support scientists doing crucial biomedical research on COVID-19. But as you've heard me say so many times, there's so much more to the story. So let's start with BioLogos. It was founded in 2007 by Francis Collins, who is head of the National Institutes of Health and who is feckless Fauci's boss. I visited the BioLogos website, and the first statement on the front page is, love your neighbor, wear a mask. Much on the site leads Christians to believe that the organization is really dedicated to Christian teachings, but as usual, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find all kinds of interesting things. So here's a statement, yet no end to the world pandemic is expected in the near future. As a matter of fact, experts expect the disease to be with us for a long time. This is on the Christian website. Unlike its cousin SARS, what can we do? There's no effective treatment yet. A couple of drug candidates may be promising, the best of which so far is an antiviral drug called remdesivir that does not cure coronavirus infection but expedites recovery. A clinical trial with more than 1,000 patients. It goes on to describe the miracles of remdesivir. And it goes on to say our best chance of defeating the disease and protecting lives is most likely herd immunity. Herd immunity is when enough people in the population become immune to the infectious disease so the channels of spread are stopped. The herd immunity threshold for COVID-19 is roughly 70%. This means 70% of the population need to have immunity to stop the spread. Immunity can be achieved through natural infection or vaccination, and it would be a disastrous scenario for an infection as deadly as COVID-19 to achieve herd immunity through natural infection. So, how fast can a vaccine be developed? This is all on the Christian site, started by Francis Collins, who is Fauci's boss. With COVID-19 spreading like wildfire in the world and lockdowns unable to be sustained long-term to halt its spread, do we have time? The director of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIH, Anthony Fauci, says we may expect a vaccine to be available in 12 to 18 months. Can it be made this fast? What does it take to develop a vaccine? In response to the issue of vaccines, this is all from this site. I'm kind of saving the punchline to last, so stay with me. In response to the issue of vaccines usually taking a long time to be developed, however, in the case of COVID-19, this stage moved at lightning speed. Identification and isolation of the pathogen only took a couple weeks, and identifying the target molecules and making the targets into a vaccine candidate took place in a couple of months. Why can we now accomplish these steps within a few months rather than a few years? Well, thanks to years of research studying other coronaviruses like the ones causing SARS and MERS, and the common cold, we now have basic understanding of the COVID virus. Moreover, vaccine platforms and development strategies have improved dramatically in the last 20 years, so making a new vaccine can be quite rapid. But this doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be proven to be safe and effective. That still needs to be tested. So the bottom line is, let's look at where we are. Christians are signing this agreement. The organization that's promoting this is started by the head of the NIH, and you go to the website of his group, and it's all about the vaccine. So another article on the same site featured this statement: when we are vaccinated, we contribute to a societal effort to minimize disease. And then there's an article called Mother Knows Best, which features this type of information. There's a subtitle that says, "Why do I trust my pediatrician in vaccine science?" Fortunately, severe adverse events are exceedingly rare, and most resolve over time without long-lasting effects. There is a common lack of trust in pharmaceutical companies. People often think that for-profit institutions have inherent bias. Of course, such biases should be critically evaluated. However, we should also consider that producing unsafe and ineffective vaccines would be unprofitable and damaging to a company's reputation. This mother is too stupid to live, okay? She obviously doesn't understand what's going on at all, because this year, industry will give to the Food and Drug Administration $2.6 billion. And so this is all very profitable to the vaccine makers. So here's something: who can we trust for information? Many people also do not trust information coming from government organizations. It's the job of the CDC, the FDA, and the WHO to promote public health and also to ensure consumer safety of vaccines and pharmaceuticals. Such governmental organizations are independent of pharmaceutical companies and are not funded by them. That is patently false. The drug companies are contributors to the Centers for Disease Control, National Institutes of Health, and the FDA. I just said $2.6 billion this year to the FDA. So there's even more to the story. I told you, there's more. So you could read this site forever. It's got tons of stuff to read, but it's just populated with all of this type of information that I've just shared with you. In May of this year, Francis Collins received a $1.2 million award from the Templeton Foundation. An interesting feature of the Templeton Foundation website is the family planning section, which includes these comments about a project in Rwanda and Uganda. The project, supported by a $900,000 grant from the Templeton Foundation, builds on earlier work by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's A3 project. What a lovely group we have. Templeton, which builds on population control efforts in Africa initiated by Gates, gives Collins $1.2 million, who mobilizes his pro-vaccine charity to recruit Christians to endorse the upcoming COVID-19 vaccine. And it all happens without 99% of the people understanding all these interesting and complicated relationships. Interesting. All right, that's all for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy learning more about the truth about all of this that's going on. And I will be back to you tomorrow with more news.